Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 162 of the Note Coach podcast. Nothing grows in your comfort zone. I'm your host, Suzanne Culberg, welcoming back the amazing Onnie Michalsky. And we were chatting in a previous episode, and this line came out of Onnie. She's like, nothing grows in your comfort zone. And it is so true. Something I've heard before. Discomfort is the currency of change. And I think I know Onnie's work is mums without capes. I know majority of my listeners are female, women's, but for the dudes, you'll get the concept. But there's a difference between a stretch and a snap. So like the comfort zone, we want to stretch it. Like I'm thinking labor stretch here, people. Like the body stretches to have the baby come out.
I was not picturing that, but now I am.
Now you are. But sometimes things snap or tear. The other one, if that one's too gross, okay, a muscle. Like if you're in a yoga position.
There we go. Yeah.
You know, you're at the yoga and you're leaning into the hamstring stretch. You want to feel the discomfort. Like you want to take it to the point, because that's how a muscle grows. If you don't put the muscle under stress, like use stress, it won't adapt. Like muscle fibers basically tear and come back stronger, but we don't want to snap. And I think sometimes I'm interested to hear your take on this, but a lot of people I work with, and I know, past me, I'd get to the point where I couldn't stand being in my comfort zone any longer. I'm so sick of myself that I need to change stat. And then I kind of try and do this leap, like this crazy leap over to this version of me who's going to be, she's going to be so good. She's going to get up early. She's going to journal. She's going to meditate. She's going to make all the nourishing food.
Do all the things.
Processed, no sugar. And then like, that would just be like, I could probably maintain it for maybe 2 weeks at a stretch or a snap, and then something would happen and be like, this is ridiculous, and it'd be the smallest thing, and then it'd be all the way back over here. So the way I like to think about it is, if you are in your comfort zone and you're wanting to move out of it, and you can identify with this all or nothing, imagine you're on one side of a cliff and you're trying to leap to the other side, and you end up kind of crashing and burning and then going again. Instead, what if you were a trapeze artist? As in, it's not a cliff, it's a trapeze. And as you're trying to reach for the other, what do they call that? Swing? No? Handle? Do you know what I mean? When
I give it a swing, I think.
Yeah. So say you're on one side and you're wanting to get to the other side. If you miss the grab on the swing, you fall down, but there's a trampoline that catches you. It's not a cliff. You're not like suffering or whatever. It's a bit uncomfortable. You dust yourself up and you climb up again. And I think that's coming out of the comfort zone. It's like, I don't know how to trapeze yet, and I might get a bit banged up and a bit bruised, but I'm willing to have another go, as opposed to making it be this cliff dive where you have to make it or you failed. Yeah. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on, comfort zones.
The comfort zone. Yeah, I actually really like your idea of that compound effect. And like doing like just like the pennies, right? Like, because it takes us, it's those little steps, right? Instead of thinking like that all or nothing thinking, where, because that's exactly right. Like every time that I have made the attempts to like do anything, like it was always like this all or nothing. And then if one thing goes wrong, then I'm like way back in the beginning, because I'm like, oh, I failed everything, right? But knowing that, I feel like that's a whole nother podcast episode, right? But like this comfort zone thing is taking yourself out of your comfort zone, doing things that are a bit of a stretch, but not so much that you're going to snap. Not so much that, that if something goes wrong, you're all the way back at the beginning. Kind of like, I think of like a rubber band, right? Like you can stretch it.
Because if you stretch a rubber band too much, then it won't go back to its shape. It will end up all kind of out of shape. I love that.
Or it'll break. And so like being able to get yourself to a place that you're actually like making improvement, that you're doing things, because it's right. Like if it doesn't challenge you, it won't change you. And you've got to be willing to take that challenge and, work at it in order for it to change you, in order for the experience to change you, or for you to change yourself. And so, but as long as you stay comfortable, which I think this is where it came from in our last episode, like as long as you stay comfortable, like we're designed to stay comfortable because that keeps us alive, right? Like, neurologically, like that keeps us alive. And so we want to continue to, in order to grow, we've got to continue to get uncomfortable. And that is hard for a lot of people and a lot of situations. It's hard to see like, how far can I take this without snapping?
What comes to mind is, and I've been chatting to a few clients about this recently, sometimes rock bottom is an easier place to change from because the only way is up. Like if everything's literally come crashing down and you're like homeless or bankrupt or, you know, whatever, the only way is up. Like, you know, we've been in situations where my husband's been made redundant. Like he doesn't have a job anymore. We have to change because there is no more income coming in. Where it's more challenging to get out of, when I think of a comfort zone, what I think of is, I don't know if you guys call this is Australian English, an inner tube. Like you lie in it and you float on a river or whatever.
An inner tube,
So you imagine getting into an inner tube is usually kind of easy. You just kind of slide in there.
Yeah.
Getting out of an inner tube, like there's the people on Instagram who look fabulous, who just kind of jump out and nothing moves and their hair stays dry and they go about their merry way. Or there's Suze getting out of an inner tube who kind of looks like a beached whale. The water goes up my nose and in my ear and my hair's ridiculous. And it's like, I hope no one's videoing this because it's going to end up on YouTube. Because down very close to our house, there's a water park and we go there and my kids give me so much like grief for me getting out of the inner tube. They're like, that is YouTube worthy.
Definitely not smooth. Yeah.
But, you know, but the thing is, that's what the comfort zone's like. When we get in there, we slid in there, you're floating down the river. And like, if your tube snaps and you suddenly like, oh my gosh, if I don't get out of here, I'm going to drown. Then you will try and get to the side and you will like save yourself. But if you're still floating and it's not uncomfortable, but it's not exactly comfortable. But, you know, I'm worried that if I try and cut out of here, I'm going to face plant and become a YouTube sensation. Then it can be easier to stay in the comfort zone. So it's kind of, as you said, the pennies. I've done a whole episode on that. It's something I teach in my program, Why Wait? But it's the smallest possible steps to kind of expand your comfort zone, to grow outside of it. Not the all or nothing, like I need to never eat chocolate again. I need to only drink water, because it's not sustainable. And the change to come out of your comfort zone, because then your comfort zone kind of expands. And what in the beginning is uncomfortable, like imagine if you were doing yoga and you go and you're like, I'm really inflexible and I'm doing the butterfly and my knees are up near my but then over time your comfort zone expands as you continue to stretch it.
Yes. Yeah. That's it just reminded me of like just that, you know, the way you do the pennies and expanding your comfort zone. Like it takes practice and it takes consistency. And when you're trying to do all of the things, like when you completely take yourself from like comfortable to discomfort, like total discomfort by trying to do it all, like when you I wouldn't say mess up, but like when you can't do all the things because it's too unrealistic, right? Then you are brought back to your comfort zone, or you're like immediately brought back to your comfort zone by saying, I'm not going to do it all. I'm not going to do any of this.
Too much.
Because
that's
it was
something
just
I don't know
hard.
if I said this on the pennies episode, so thank you for bringing it back. So in Why Wait, so basically there's a whole episode on pennies. Encourage you to go back and find that one. Just search up pennies, you should find it. But I really encourage people to have no more than 4. Because pennies are such small actions, people often go, well, it's only going to take a minute. So they overload themselves with 8 or 10 or 16 things. But the idea of a penny is the smallest, it's your minimum baseline. So say, for example, movement, exercise, my penny is to put my sneakers, my running shoes on and to walk to my mailbox, which no, it's not far. It's like 12 steps from my house. But ideally, I'd like to walk for 45 minutes. But if I say to myself, go for a walk for 45 minutes, oh, it's raining, oh, it's hot, oh, it's cold, oh, I'm cranky. Yeah. But the penny is what gets me out the door. So the idea of the pennies isn't to overload yourself with so many of them, because you actually do have a goal, but it's the smallest possible step that if nothing else happens today, I've done that and that will be enough. But you can't compound it, like grow it, if there's too many of it. Like if you have 16 pennies and ideally they're all going to take 40 minutes each, you got to eat, you got to work, you got to sleep, you got to shower, you got other things you got to do.
Not realistic. It's not realistic. And so when you're looking at like, what can I do today that's outside of my comfort zone? Like it may be just putting my sneakers on and walking to the mailbox. If for a long time you haven't even put your sneakers on, like if you haven't even dusted them off, like that could be a stretch for you. And so figuring out like what could be just a little bit out of my comfort zone to get you just going, right? To build that, like to get the momentum going.
Momentum.
And then
Yes.
you can continue to go on. But like you said, like just getting yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone is better than just completely staying in your comfort zone. And because nothing changes.
And
Nothing changes, nothing grows.
celebrating, allowing yourself. So like,
Mhm.
for example, my group program, my weight, I'll use that as an example. I am a highly sensitive introvert, socially awkward person, which people like to argue with me about, but you know, it's interesting. Meet me in person, you'll have a whole other story. But what I love when I run the program is some people are uncomfortable in group situations, which I am too. I'm different in the one that I run because like this is my house and my party. But you
Mhm.
know, so there's been people who've done the program who in the beginning coming to the call was a stretch for them. They had their camera
Yeah.
off, they didn't ask a question, but simply being in the space was a stretch. And then over a number of weeks and sometimes even a number of rounds, like, oh, I'll put my camera on. Oh, I'll
Yeah,
ask
they
a
get a little bit
question.
more
Like
comfortable.
little bit. And there's one person in particular who's done a number of rounds now. And it's like, I swear she could teach the whole program. But watching that and observing that growth over time. Whereas if you're like, actually, I'm going to force myself to have my camera on and ask all the questions, and it's too much, and your nervous system's feeling like freeze, then you're not going to get the most that you need from the program or whatever it is you're trying to change because you've overloaded like your circuits, for lack of a
Yeah.
better way of putting
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And I want to mention, like, when you think of that, like in the worry or the anxiety that comes out from like pushing yourself a little bit beyond that comfort zone line, asking yourself like, well, your thoughts are probably going to what's the worst that could, like, the worst case scenario. And so they say, like, well, what's the worst that could happen? But then also asking yourself, what's the best that could happen? And,
Yes.
letting that determine your decision.
That's actually three
Because
questions I ask myself very frequently.
yeah,
What's the worst case scenario? And I really let myself go there. Like I could be destitute and eating out of a garbage can.
yeah,
You know, what's the best case scenario? Oh, I could be invited to go on Oprah. And then I'm like,
yeah.
what's the
And what's the
most
most
likely
realistic?
scenario? Yeah. Or what's,
Yeah,
as you said, what's the most realistic? Because that it lets the brain go to both things and go,
yeah,
well, this could happen, that could happen, but chances
yeah.
are, and I don't know, I find that quite
Possible
calming.
versus probable. But like, it's
Yes.
possible that could happen, but it's more probable that this is going to happen, and that's probably a good thing. Like whatever it is that's probable, more chances than not, it's a good thing.
And even
It
the
means
worst
you
case
grow.
scenario, sometimes when I do paint it out, I'm like, is that really the worst case scenario? It's like, no, what's the
Yes.
worst case scenario if I'm going to ask a question on a group? Like, to me, the worst case scenario is like everybody laughs at me. Like, that really is. It's like,
Mm,
can I hold that? And sometimes,
yeah.
no. Sometimes it's like, today's not the
Yeah.
day that I could risk being laughed at. And that's okay. I just
Right.
won't ask. But most
Right.
of the time, it's like, yeah, like if that's really the worst thing that people misunderstand me and laugh at me, especially because I'm an Aussie, we speak differently sometimes. I've shared about it before on one of the episodes. It's been my most commented on one. I don't know if you've heard the rubber story, Onnie.
No.
So
No. But I can only imagine.
you're laughing. You get it. In Australia, a rubber is what you guys would call an eraser. So in my
Huh.
second year of uni, we have an international audience at the
Yeah,
uni.
I get it.
I
A
asked
rubber
this guy
eraser.
for a rubber. He starts opening his wallet. I'm like, what is he doing? And I said, can I borrow it? And he's like, well, I ain't going to want it back. And I was meaning his eraser because we were working on a science project together. So like everybody laughed and I was a bit humiliated. Now it's a funny story on a number of podcasts. So, worst case scenario wasn't really that bad. We had a failure to communicate.
Yeah, yes, yeah, I'd say. But yeah, even like that worst case scenario, like playing the script to the end. Like, okay, if the worst thing that happened, they laugh at you, then what? Like, and ultimately, it usually comes out like you'll be okay. Like, you wouldn't we when we do worst case scenario, we forget to factor in our own intelligence. Like we forget to factor ourselves into the equation and saying like it will never get to the worst case scenario because I would have totally like intervened before
Yep, the
that.
call. Oh,
Like
sorry, I'm going
so
through a tunnel. Hang up.
yes, like so yeah,
Yeah, but
it's
also
just
too, I think sometimes if it did really go that way, maybe it'd be like, well, this community isn't for me. And I leave earlier rather than hanging out for months in somewhere that I really don't belong.
yeah,
And then I
yeah,
don't actually want to be. So sometimes, fast forwarding a worst case scenario is actually in service if you zoom out.
right, Right.
I love
Absolutely.
that. So thank you so much once again for joining us, Onnie. Let the listeners know what you do and where they can find you. Oh, are you there? It looks like we may have.
Sure. So I am a
there you
licensed
go. No, you're back.
therapist here in this. Oh, okay. I'm a therapist here in the States, but then I'm also a life and wellness coach, and I serve moms. My business is Moms Without Capes, MOMS. And yeah, I've got a podcast, the Moms Without Capes podcast. I also have a Facebook group. So if you're on Facebook, come on over and join me. We got lots of fun things happening all of the time. And yeah, if you want to find anything more about me, momswithoutcapes.com.
And you have a resource for listeners. Was it mumswithoutcapes.com/nope?
Backslash forward slash. Yes.
Yeah.
Forward slash
Slash.
nope. The slash nope.
Check that out. And that's something for the listeners. So thank you so much for joining once again. Thank you everyone for listening. Catch you on the next one. Bye for now.